Hi to everybody online. I'm pleased to welcome you to our first Leadership Matters global event. What we try to do with this event is try and take it from the classrooms at Aston University, where we usually invite around 100 people or so from a local audience, to try and take leadership and different matters that relate to leadership right across the world, to tap into our global audience, to get our alumni on board, to get leaders from across the world on board, and try and share some insights and different thoughts about what leadership looks like, what management looks like, and trying to help people think differently about the way we might lead or manage staff right across the world, whatever the environment you're in then. I'm very pleased to have three very special guests today who will introduce themselves shortly, but I'm very grateful to Lucy, Stephen and Doug for their time today, and I'm hoping that we'll have a very interesting conversation about leadership, the different things that matter to them, their experiences, and how they've journeyed across their life and what they've learned through those experiences and organizations then. So I'm going to come to you first of all. Lucy, do you want to give a brief introduction to yourself? And then you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll go on to Doug next after that then.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me here today. My name's Lucy Cohen. I'm the founder and CEO of an accounting technology company called Mazuma, founded in 2006. So I've been going for the best part of 20 years now. I've grown a company from my spare bedroom to a multi-million-pound company now, and employing, I think, upwards of 70 odd people in the UK. So obviously very much been on that leadership journey, learning how a growing team shifts and change and those styles involved with it. And I'm also a recent MBA graduate from Aston. So it's lovely to be here.
Great, thanks, Lucy. And I'm going to bring everybody on screen. So thanks for the introduction. Doug, do you want to give a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My name's Doug Wright, and I have had various roles since I began working. I began at 16 years old, didn't go to university, unfortunately, and joined a well-known restaurant company, very small at the time, called McDonald's, and ended up sort of having a meteoric rise. Went from being the toilet cleaner, doesn't sound overly glamorous, to owning and operating McDonald's biggest franchise organization in the UK. Went from only one restaurant, went up to 26 restaurants, and ended up employing 3,007 people, which was an art in itself, and really got to understand about how to manage people and to lead people. And I sold that business 12 weeks ago. So that myself, I am a visiting professor and have an doctorate with Aston University, which I'm very proud of.
Thanks, Doug. I'm both very excited to have you here and also very jealous of your current circumstances that we were talking about earlier. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that journey, because it sounds like an incredible tale you've got to tell as well. Then over to you, Stephen, for an introduction.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm speaking to you from New York, and I'm a graduate of Aston. I got my undergraduate and my PhD in chemical engineering from Aston. For the last 30 years, I've been a leadership coach. I work every day with business leaders, helping them improve their performance as leaders as they run their companies. When I started 30 years ago, I discovered that talking about leadership was something people would pay for. So I made a business partnership out of it, and I'm very grateful. I also discovered that my Aston education, the style of my Aston education, made it a very good fit between me and the way private equity and big bank thinkers talk about business. So many of my clients are companies owned by private equity banks who, and I'm sure you all know, have to accelerate their performance in order to make their owners very wealthy. So that's me. Thank you, Paul.
Great, thanks, Stephen. So the first thing I want to try and talk to you about, and one of the things that comes up quite often when I'm talking to students about leadership and management, is what's the difference then? So I want to get from your perspectives, what is leadership compared to management, do we think? And I come to you first, Lucy. So what's that difference between the two? What do you think in your experiences?
Yeah, so management is very much about the day-to-day performance, KPIs, OKRs, keeping the wheels turning, the kind of day-to-day your business as usual that keeps an organization running. Everyone's got their job to do. Somebody has to make sure they're doing them on time, to budget, managing that performance. What gets measured gets managed. It doesn't mean that there isn't some leadership in management, and really good managers I found have been inspirational and motivational leaders as well. But if you take leadership and management as different things, you can be a great leader and a horrible manager, and vice versa. I think leadership is about that ability to galvanize a workforce, to really clearly articulate and get people bought into what the vision and mission of a company is, and get everybody pulling in the same direction. That's kind of it's a leading somebody into battle, not just making sure they're fighting the right people with the right weapons. I'd say that's kind of, for me, that's kind of the difference.
And it feels like a battle sometimes. I've been in plenty of organizations where the culture can be a bit off sometimes and things don't work right. And sometimes it can feel like that battle internally. I'm interested to hear from you, Doug, as well, because you just mentioned about your rise from being a cleaner right up to having this massive business. What was it like for you in terms of your views on leadership and management? Because there's a hard battle to find there about managing those things like Lucy just mentioned, but also trying to be a leader as the company grows, and those things might have mutated over time then.
Yeah, I mean, look, we took a very different approach. When I say we on a bad day, I on a good day, it was obviously my company. And I think what we learned very early on is that you need to make people feel valued and special. And all you expect in return is the 2 H's, to be honest and hardworking. One of the sort of really big things I did early on was I almost parked up the corporate rule book in the lay-by, so that in the background the rule book ran. But what we wanted to do, and this kind of really articulates the difference between management and leadership. Managing is all about the day-to-day, the systems and the processes. The leadership is about inspiring people and making sure that you can help people understand the vision of the business and also the strategy. And, that means many different things for people, but ultimately leadership is about inspiring people to want to be you and to feel that they're on a journey and that everyone comes with us, or as many people as they want to. So I think with leadership as a young person, I found it hard, but as you get older and wiser, a great example of leadership is 20 years ago, Doug Wright would have wanted to be the best person in his business. 20 years later, Doug Wright only wants to hire subject matter experts. So life is a journey, but the leadership piece is trying to be that person that everyone aspires to be, and that has got a really, really wonderful moral compass. So that's how I would differentiate the two.
It's really interesting about the moral compass. We might come back to that a bit later then. I want to get your thoughts, Stephen, because you've got a different experience then for the last 30 years of working with companies and trying to release all this performance. And you might have a different perspective then on how we see this battle between leadership and management in organizations you get to work with them.
Well, I don't think it's a battle. I agree with Lucy and Douglas in lots of ways. I always say, in the answer to your question, that leadership skills are super management skills, and they are specifically super management skills that are about the future. That a manager is often trying to get things done today, where a leader is trying to get people to understand their followers, right? Can't have leadership without followership. Trying to understand the future successful functioning of the organization. Notice I said functioning of the organization, the future successful functioning, and getting them to buy into that. What I would say, which I think was underscored by what Douglas said, is how you lead yourself as a leader, how you manage your reactions and your own emotional state and all those kind of things. Doug used the word inspire people, but how you do that is an important leadership skill as well. I tend to say it's about managing yourself with excellence. If you want others to perform well, you've got to lead yourself with excellence. when I speak to people and I give a talk, I always say, every CEO I coach, I always say, there's three elements to super management, to leadership, which is the describing the future in a functional way, connecting people to it, and managing yourself effectively. And I always say, which do you think is the most difficult of those three? And everybody says managing yourself. Nobody ever says the other two. And I think in lots of ways, if somebody wants to be on a leadership journey, as your students do, facing into that is really important. People come to me and say, well, my team are disagreeing, or people in my marketing people are complaining, and so on. I always say, my first question is, what is it about you as the leader that's causing that to happen? And if people don't throw me out of their office when I ask that question, I usually get a long-term client out of it, which is absolutely perfect. So I hope that helps.
I think there's some interesting points that you all mentioned. And one of the things that springs to mind, we talked about the importance of leadership and how you might action that in organizations. One of the things I often discuss with students and with people who are leaders in organizations is that all of your organizations are being filled with individuals, essentially. They've all got different motivations, different ways of viewing the world. And one leadership style might not resonate with all those people. It's unlikely to. How could you just be this one type of leader? So how do you mix and match that leadership style? Are you able to adapt that style for different audiences? Is that a thought in your brains when you're being a leader, or is just being authentic to one true idea of yourself the important bit? I'm really keen to get your thoughts on that then. Doug, I'll come to you first. I'll come to Lucy then. Have you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question. For me, I didn't do particularly well at school, but I was very good at sport. And I found out that there was a real synergy between sport and business. And, for me, the one thing I had in droves was a special ability to make everyone feel good. And I had that ability to talk to, whether it was a cleaner, whether it was a director, the people officer, whatever it was. We tried to make sure that throughout the organization, it was eventually called culture, but the way you did business when we started was that everyone was treated exactly the same. And I think that really, really helps grow. That because what you need is that culture needs to be authentic, it needs to be owned by everybody. And because we had that culture, whether you were the postman, the cleaner, whatever you were, that our door was open for you. And we did lots of smart things along the way. And one of the smartest things we did was a lot of engagement early doors with people. And I think that we brought them with us, and that, multi-site management and scaling a business is difficult. But, we were very people-centric, and we were very different to many other restaurant companies where we made people, and I alluded to earlier, that we made people feel valued and special. But it's got to come from, everyone has to be aligned. And alignment is key if you're going to grow quickly and with longevity.
That's about giving people the spaces to be part of the organization, not just being dictatorial in terms of your leadership style and saying it's got to be this way, but actually giving people sometimes the space and the value they have by being seen and being heard in organizations, then to take people on that journey and not just to force them to follow a pathway, but actually motivate them to want to follow you down that pathway then, and in a more natural way. Lucy, have you got any thoughts on that from your own perspective?
Yeah, I'd say that certainly my leadership style differs slightly. I'm quite happy to put myself out there as I'm quite a demanding person to work for. We're a scale-up company. It means you have to move very quickly. I have very high expectations of people, but the important thing is that I'm really clear with those expectations, and that is apparent in our recruitment cycles as well. So all of our, people management and our recruitment pipeline and our interview and all the rest of it, at no point shy away from the fact that we have high standards, and I demand things of people. When you're working in a high growth scale up tech company, which is what we are now, even though we've been around a while, the last few years, we've got a huge amount of development happening. Things are changing really rapidly. In fact, this is really timely this week. I just I was finding myself as a leader getting frustrated with my team, which is not a surprise because they literally all had an email about it yesterday. Getting frustrated that people are, because I'm the founder and CEO and I've been in the business a long time, it can end up being that people want the quickest route to the right answer. And if that is you, you end up being that person all the time, which means that they don't form those links to be able to make their own decision making. And as a leader, especially if you've been in the organization and you're kind of native to it, you've been in it a long time, Douglas, you might have the same thing. You're there right from the bottom all the way to the top. You know so much, you're such a shortcut that people sort of get a bit cognitively lazy and, oh, Lucy will know, Douglas will know. Actually, what you really want to do is to get people to make their own decisions, but know that they're psychologically safe to do so. And psychological safety doesn't mean that it's just always a super, cuddly place to work. It means that actually people know that they know what the consequence of their decisions and ability to hit or not outcomes is, good or bad. So you miss a target, you know what the outcome's going to be, and you feel that outcome. So you don't end up with a kind of sort of Damocles effect hanging over you. That psychological safety is knowing repercussions and what happens. I find that that's really powerful in building a team that kind of comes with you on that journey, but also being absolutely clear in what type of organization you are and what that looks like, what looks and feels like to work there. If you go, there are some, I'm not going to name any names here, but there's some very famous people from large companies who are probably quite difficult to work with. But there is no way that you would go into that company thinking you'd be getting anything else. You know what to expect when you work there. If that's fine, you can be any kind of organization you want, as long as people know what they're getting into and they sign up for it and they're happy with it, as long as it's legal, obviously. It's about making sure that that's really clear. If you are, I think the problem comes when there's a disconnect and when it's incongruent. If you are pitching yourself out there as this lovely, soft, fluffy, laissez-faire company to work with, and then actually when people get in there, it's very results driven, very hard on targets, very little room for failure, then you're going to get churn and you're going to get a culture mismatch, and then it's really difficult to get people to come with you. So I think that's kind of where I've come on that journey, that I think it's absolutely fine to take a more rigid, structured approach to it, as long as you're clear and everyone's agreed to it and everyone's signed up to it and aligned with that mission. That's, I think, when you get the best in terms of leading teams.
Yeah, and it's really interesting about the cultural mismatch, because we have a lot of international students that come to study PG courses, and then they want to stay in the UK, they want to get visas, and they're desperate to work, they're enthusiastic, motivated. But that then goes away somewhere from getting the right match. So I talked to a lot of students about it can't just be about getting a job, it's about getting the right type of job with the right culture and making sure that the person they are fits with the culture they're going into there. Otherwise, it's going to be a very painful experience for all involved then. And Stephen, have you got thoughts then on that ability about leadership and being able to develop in different ways? Because you're working with the CEO, so I'm really interested whether you see this ability to be almost like a leadership chameleon of having different ways to show your leadership at different times in different ways then.
The same, I tend to, well, first of all, I agree with what my colleagues have said, but I want to say I tend to say it's not about style, but about impact.
Yeah.
And the impact I'm after in people that are following me in their performance and their attitude and that sort of stuff. And in support of that, then I tend to say that I will customize my relationship with people one-on-one to get the impact I want, without shifting off the sort of the platform of my authentic self, right? Yeah. Who I really am. And being able to express who I really am to people to get the impact that I want out of them. And I just think that's so it is. I do think it more and more becomes customized, and I do think that impact is really important. So, and I think that's all I've got to say on that one. Really, I'm inspiring people requires you to show that you're inspired.
I agree with that.
When I ask people, what's the most important leadership quality of bosses that you want? Most of them say consistency. That if you're going to be a bastard, they want you to be a bastard every day. Or if you're going to be scatterbrained, they want you to be scatterbrained every day, then go to their colleagues and sort out the scatterbrainedness amongst themselves, because people talk with each other. That if you are consistent in that situation and you're on your own authentic platform, then you are going to be successful, in my view.
So I got a follow-up question for you, Steve, and then I'll come to the rest of you for this as well. We've talked a little bit about that authentic journey that people go on. That's not something easy to achieve, though, is it, to really understand yourself, who you are as a leader, who you are as a person. So is that something that's grown for you over time, Stephen, in terms of how that's developed for you? Has that been an easy journey for you for any reason, or has that been a difficult journey?
I think it has been, I would say it's been a difficult journey for me. And it was the difficulty of that journey of my personal development as a leader and some of the failures as well as successes that took me into what I'm doing now. So that in a coaching relationship, I'm talking to leaders about that part of their makeup and the effect that it has on their organization. And I would say quite definitely, if somebody who wants to be a leader and a successful leader for the long term, that doesn't say they understand it's about their personal development as an individual, that person's going to fail, I'm afraid, because you have to come to terms with the fact that it's going to hurt sometimes and it's going to be great sometimes, which is what the journey's like. I always say leadership is not an event, it's a journey, with moments in that journey where the leadership spotlight is turned on you periodically, an important moment. But fundamentally, it's a journey of growth for you and how you deal with people.
And I think for all the listeners, I come to you and Lucy and Doug shortly about this, I think it's important to remember that we're all on journeys. We'll make decisions that sometimes are the best decision ever. Other times they'll be the worst decision ever. For me, it's always about what can I learn from these experiences? How do I take that forward then? So when I talk to students, it's very much about you're going to make mistakes. Things aren't always going to go your way, but it's what you learn, how you react to those things then that will afford your career path. No one's journey has been perfect in every sense of the word. There'll be ups and downs and twists and turns like any good book. So I think that there's a journey for all of us and it'll all be different, but it's how we decide to play our part in that journey that becomes really important then. And Lucy, is that what it's been like for you in terms of ups and downs, starting a business, making that happen? If I remember rightly, you started the business with £100. Is that right? That I remember rightly? That's a massive thing to do. But that journey from then to where you are now, there's got to be twists and turns, I'd imagine.
Of course, anybody who says anything different is lying to you. Starting a business is tough. It's why not everyone does it. And for a long time, you'll be incredibly stressed and monumentally underpaid for your efforts. I think that the differentiator there is believing that you have a purpose and that what you're doing matters, and you believe in whatever product or service it is that you're doing. I think also there's a big difference between starting a business and running it for yourself and kind of you self-sustaining and being self-employed and that sort of thing versus building something that you want to scale. They're two different beasts. Building something for scale involves thinking 3-5 years ahead into the future all the time, whilst being able to pivot as that world changes. In my time in business, so I started in 2006, we had the credit crunch, we've had the housing market collapse, we've had I think I can't even count the number of recessions we've had now. We've had a global pandemic. We've now got the disruption of AI. This has all happened just in the time that I've been in business. You've got to, if you pig-headedly stick to the original business plan, you will go nowhere. You have to be able to pivot. And then leadership and taking a team with you whilst growing a team as well is about explaining to them why that's happened. And also recognizing, for me, I think one of the things that I've really realized, especially in the latest kind of phase of growth, we've over doubled in size in the last 18 months, and we're likely to do the same again and again. So we're on a very fast trajectory. With all the will in the world, the people who are here when you're a 10-person company are probably not the same people, at least not all of them, who are likely to thrive when you're a 100-person company, because rules get tighter. You end up having HR in. The people who were maybe close to you and you hired them as technicians or doers when you were the direct line management, if they're not also on a sharp trajectory in terms of career, you are suddenly padding that layer between you with additional people. And that can feel really impersonal and I think quite hurtful sometimes, because it feels like people who used to have a direct route to you are now literally being told, yeah, you don't get to talk to me directly anymore. You have to take that to line. It isn't I can't make those decisions anymore. I shouldn't make those decisions anymore. I need to trust people in the line to do that. So it's a really different feel. And it sometimes feels like I think you get to a point where you feel like it's much bigger than yourself. And you suddenly got all these people around you. And I try not to think about how many people's mortgages I pay and stuff like that. It's just I'd never sleep at night if I thought about it. But you've got to be that kind of mad to want to do this. But things go wrong. And when things go wrong as a leader, your job is to keep people calm. When people are freaking out because the world's closed and how are we going to work from home and what does this mean and how do I do it? You have to, like a swan on the water, your little legs paddling, you're just kind of keeping it all nice and calm. You even though you don't know what tomorrow is going to hold, you're like, it's okay, it's fine, we've got this, we've got the capability. No, we've not experienced this before, but we do have the skill set, we can do this. Your job is to do that, even though inside you might be screaming. You have to just keep going. And I think that actually, if I was going to kind of give unsolicited advice about leadership, is to not underestimate the bandwidth and toll that takes, and also that nobody else will see it. So you will sit in your seat with all the information in front of you and not be able to rant or vent. And at the real top of leadership, it's an incredibly lonely place to be. And so that's where your peer network, where mentors, where coaches, where other CEOs who are going through the same thing as you are really valuable. Because in your own organization, if you're right at the top of that tree, you are on your own. And that's something to remember, because it's people smiling at me. It's incredibly lonely up there. So it's about building that network, because you need support too. You can't bear it all.
And there's an interesting point. We might come back to that, because there's an idea about how we protect the other people in the business. You mentioned about paying mortgages, but also how do you protect yourself as well then from those pressures, and what support mechanisms do you put yourself around then? I'll come to you, Doug, because I'm really interested in the journey you went on in terms of any authenticity, and we talked about that earlier then. So what was it like for you compared to Stephen and Lucy? Was it similar? Was it the differences?
Listen, I had this amazing, I was cash rich compared to Lucy. I had 612 Great British pounds when I started.
Wow.
So,
that's a massive percentage, isn't it? Difference.
Yeah, so the 100 was usurped by 612 pounds. Listen, there's many different things I could talk about, but what I've got to try and do is contextualize it for the people who are listening. Running a business can be brutal at times, but it is also, I would encourage everyone to try it and do it. If you believe in something, you've got to, the big thing you've got to do is you've got to understand your business. You've got to be a subject matter expert, but you've got to exude passion. And you've got to be able to have this front facing when people come and see you. One of the fun things I found fascinating was when you start, people come to you regularly and say, can I ask about this? What do we do? And sometimes you don't know. And you just got to say, let me think about it for 30 minutes. And if anyone's on this call and is smiling because I've at some stage said, leave that with me for 30 minutes, you've then got to go into a room, get a glass of water, and then you've got to come out. And as a leader, what you have to do is you have to make a decision. We'll make decisions sometimes that are wrong, but people who work for you are looking for guidance, and we don't want it. There's no point you being the leader if you're going to say, I'll get back to you next week or the week after or whatever. Our job is the conduit. We've got to keep the business going and everything happening. So you make a decision, only make a mistake once, you'll never make it again. But every day in my car, I've always had written, worry about what you can control. And it's been a marvelous thing for me, so when there's been a pandemic or the cost of electric is more or the cost of food is more, I don't worry about it. All I do is worry about what I can control. So there are many conditions in the outside world which make you stop and think, gosh, is that the right decision if this is happening in America or whatever? Within your own world, if you worry about what you can control, it's a marvelous saying, because it actually works. Because then you get all the facts. You cannot control President Trump or the interest rate, but if you worry about what you can control, get your own ducks in a row, it is a wonderful way to run a business. Last thing for me, all through my life, and even today, I have a mentor. And I've either had a woman or a man looking after me. And what's the relevance to it? The relevance is this, is they are an independent check of what you're doing. The very first time I went to see my mentor, he worked for Charles King in Bedford, which is a brewery. And I was super proud of this plan. And I knocked on his door, sir, can I come in? And I showed him this plan. And I was so proud of this plan. And he said, it's awful. And he said, you need to be far more customer centric, young man. And so all throughout my life, whatever position I've been in, I've always had a mentor. I've been looked after by two great men and an amazing woman. And what they are is they're not stuck, and they haven't got all the politics of your industry. They'll just give you a check and balance. And it's like buying a free breath of fresh air. So those were my points.
Thanks, Doug. I would love to be called young man these days, but that time has passed a long time ago. Lucy and Stephen, mentorship-wise, have you benefited? Because I think it's something I've always benefited from, and not just having one mentor sometimes you can have multiple ones performing different roles. Are those things you benefit from, Stephen, as a mentor being an important part of your life?
Of course, it's because, as Lucy says, it can be lonely, a lonely eerie to be on your own. And it's in those moments, and when I'm teaching and talking to leaders, I always ask about your personal board of directors. Who are the people that are guiding you? Now, some of the personal board of directors, I get people to do a little exercise, because often people who are not succeeding need to change their personal board of directors. They need to fire some of the people. And some of the members of your personal board of directors are historical.
Yeah.
Like your parent, my dad ran a drop forging factory in Aston when I was growing up, and I learned a lot about leadership watching him. But his particular style of leadership wasn't appropriate when I was CEO in a management consulting company. And so I had to sort of let that go. And I think I encourage people to, and I would encourage everybody to look at their personal board and keep it fresh. Not get too stuck with individuals. There's a part of your membership of your personal board of directors are technical experts too. We talk about AI. I'm sure you'll be asking us about AI later, but I would say everybody needs to have an AI expert on their personal board at the moment, at least for the next few years. Having some connection in there would be very valuable to people. So I think I've answered your question, haven't I? But that's the approach I use. And I have myself, when I was CEO at PA Consulting in North America, I had a coach, a mentor.
Yeah.
And it was actually his inspiration after I lost that job that made me think about whether I wanted to do the same. That was 30 odd years ago. And I'm glad I did, to be honest.
Thanks, Stephen. And then Lucy, how has mentorship shaped your leadership journey and the success of your business as well? How has that played a part, if it has played a part?
Yeah, I think that people sometimes think about mentorship as being something a very formal relationship, and it's not necessarily. And to Stephen's point, that kind of personal board thing, you will likely have different mentors at different times. Some of whom will know they're a mentor to you, and some who won't. People you admire, people you take inspiration from, and in the same way, I believe this about all relationships. There's not one person who can be all things to you. It's about making sure you have that network and that kind of diversity of thought around you and influence that gives you different perspectives. You don't have to agree with the people around you, but they should make you think differently, and they should push you to evaluate things in a different way. Just kind of open your eyes up a little bit. So yeah, really important. And over the years, it's it's people for reasons and seasons. And I think an interesting thing is when you're on a journey, there's a grief attached to outgrowing people as well. So people who are there in the early days, or maybe mentors you looked up in the early days, when you surpass them, not in a kind of egotistical way, but just in a factual way, your company's now bigger than theirs. Um, I think we don't talk enough about the kind of loss and grief that can be attached to scaling a business or leadership. Because if you're a good leader, you inevitably have to also rapidly scale yourself along with your company. And that means knowing when to say goodbye to people, knowing when things have to come to an end. And that's really hard. So having people around you who've been through that is super, super important. And aligning people, their skill sets to the advice you want to take from them, to where they're useful in your business, to maybe where they're useful to you. There's something so unbelievably validating. I always like to say that if I feel like I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm 100% in the wrong room. Like I like to be in rooms where I'm really made to feel quite daft, and I stand around going, "Oh God, I don't know what I was talking about. Like this is great." If I feel like I know everything, then I'm probably not in the right place. Is to kind of keep putting yourself in that situation, but also knowing that at some point, if you're doing it right, you will also outgrow that room, and you've probably made friends along the way there that suddenly don't feature as much in what you do, and kind of learning to deal with that. So that's all a part of it too, and that's maybe I think we don't talk about the loss side of it as much as we do the growth side. What you gain, you lose a lot, you do, but then I think that is kind of the balance of life, everything's weighted. Yeah, that's just kind of, it's just kind of a path. It sounds a bit kind of wishy-washy, that, but certainly the mentorship and being clear what you want from people. Some people I have literally asked, I messaged actually one of my boards yesterday. He'd mentioned something in a catch-up I was having with them, and I just messaged him going, right, I need to be inside your brain. I'm going to take you for dinner, and can I ask you a million questions, please? And like, I will pay for dinner for you. And he was like, yeah, fine, great. So just knowing, like, actually, you've just said something, and I'm going to ask for the thing I want. Like, don't hint, don't dance around it. And hopefully you're in a place where, if you're being your authentic self, someone will either go, do you know what, I don't have time for that, but I know someone who does, or yeah, absolutely, come and pick my brains, of course. And you will eventually end up being, knowingly or unknowingly, a mentor to somebody else as well. And that's kind of that's the beautiful full circleness of the whole thing.
And I think there's a joy that comes from those relationships. And some of the best moments I've had through my career is where you build those connections and actually giving back to people like other people are giving to you. That's an amazing experience. And I want to touch upon something that Stephen brought up, which is AI, because it ties into this a little bit as well. One of the things I'm interested in right about at the moment is how I think AI, the superpower for AI isn't really efficiency for me. It's about my own growth and development. So I use AI for as much as possible. Keeps a record of everything I'm having conversations with. It knows I love a good existential crisis about pontificating about the world and philosophy and all these different things, but it keeps that record for me. It's always on, so I can develop myself by having conversations and actually examining parts of me I never knew I should be examining. So for me, it's been a great tool. So I'm wondering whether any of you use it like that way, but also AI generally. How has it shaped what you currently do? Because it seems to be infiltrating all areas of life at the moment. So I'm really keen to get perspectives. Doug, I'll start with you, then I come to you, Lucy, then you.
I probably haven't, I'm probably the worst person to ask. I haven't used AI as much as, for the journey I've been on and the business I've run. I absolutely get the digital and the importance of, a business being digitally led and the comms and everything. In terms of the last couple of years, I have used it more to analyze myself and what I do and my styles. And yeah, I mean, I think people are nervous about it. I think you've got to embrace it. I'd have loved to have it 20 years ago and to challenge and see where it could have taken me, but I didn't have it. I can now see the power of digital, and I've just chaired a board where we've developed a regeneration plan for Sutton Coalfields. And, we went out and spoke and used digital and AI to get lots of feedback. And we had nearly 5,000 people feedback. So it's something that, it's uncomfortable, but it's excitingly uncomfortable because you've got to use it to move forward. So I would love to have had it earlier in my life.
And I guess the real leadership angle here is how do we cater for those different perspectives on use of AI? Because there's reshaping things. There are people who are very nervous. There's people like me who are evangelical about it and love every single thing I can get my hands on in terms of technology, and a vast swathe of people in between them. So I think there's massive changes, and as leaders, this is really key time to get this right and to appreciate there are different angles how these things work. Then, Lucy, the one thing I thought about for your business as well was how AI was affecting that, because your business is built around accountancy.
Mhm.
Is that affecting things massively for you at the moment about the shape of your business and how things work?
Oh yeah, I'm a I'm a early adopter of technology. We built an entire technology platform which uses, AI is a really broad term. I think it's really important to just define here that we're not just talking about large language models. We're talking about all kinds of things, optical character recognition, open banking, algorithmic, machine learning, deterministic probability, things like that. It's a really broad brush here. So when I say AI, I don't just mean chat. We use AI everywhere in the business. I have done for a long time, actually. I've been using it for years. It's absolutely an efficiency driver. It's making sure that we are putting humans in the bits that humans do well and not soaking their time up with low quality activity. If I always throw a challenge to people when my team love me. I have sets of questions I like to send them, and I'm sure I'm a delight. I'm sure they love getting those emails from me. But it's I ask them questions like, if your first instinct to solve a problem is to hire another human, you're thinking wrong, because all you've done there is fill up someone's time instead of thinking what's the root cause problem we can probably solve with technology now. And if we can't solve it with technology that it currently exists, can we build it? So it's about thinking like what is the actual problem versus like who do we need? And I think that's probably quite the shift in terms of how we think about culture in teams, is instead of the kind of old Dan Sullivan world, which was kind of like we start with who, actually we're thinking about, well, starting with how and what are we fixing, and then thinking about how we build that out. I think it's hugely disruptive. I also think it's massively beneficial. I use it for pieces of data analysis that I would have had to probably get a consultant in and spend thousands and thousands of pounds on a few years ago. But because I have the knowledge of how to research and I'm able to pull data sets and build models with relative ease, in kind of low code systems, I can get those insights very quickly. As a business, that gives you a bit of a moat and a commercial advantage in that I'm not waiting for information, because in the world today, the time it takes you to wait for the information to come back to you, if it's a couple of weeks or even a couple of months, things might have moved on. You might be out of date. So to get that information almost in real time when you need it is just invaluable. It lets you course correct. If you're going in the wrong direction, you're not continuing to go off course. You can pull that back quite quickly, and that's super, super important. And then it's really visibility, time logging, all the things that used to be irritating human things we had to do can now all just happen automatically in the background. And that's lovely, because those are all just minor admin annoyances that everybody hates. Great, let's get a robot to do it. If we can get ones now that will do, I don't want AI to replace kind of lovely creative pursuits. I'd rather it didn't do that. If they could find ones that like maybe do the laundry and stuff like that for me, hoovering, I think that's a really good use of them. So if we could find ones that kind of do that stuff as well, low value items things that we consider low value items for ourselves rather than kind of creative stuff, I would be very happy.
And I think the interesting point you said there, the most particular one, was about your attitude towards, if it doesn't exist, build it. And I think that what AI does now, it allows us to problem solve, to find solutions, to bring apps online within an evening's work of getting stuff to code for you. So for me, AI is all about the humans being the cherries that go on top of some of the basic work AI can do. We still want to find value for what humans do, but for me, it creates the space and time to actually add that value much more than anything before has ever done then. And Stephen, how have you found it then? So for your role of working with CEOs and being able to coach and help them develop their leadership, is AI playing a part in this for you?
Very much so. I think we're at the start of a S-curve, aren't we? A revolution. And it's going to go on many years. And I would also say I notice that there is resistance in organizations. But people think, due to the bad press probably, that AI is going to either control them or take over or things like that. And as Lucy rightly says, that's not the case. It's about removing the stuff you don't need to do, and so that you can focus on the stuff that adds value, where you can have a greater impact, of course. One of the things that I would say to every leader now in an organization is that you personally should be a user of AI.
Yeah.
That you should set the example in your organization. Don't form a committee of people who are going to come back with recommendations. You will be slow in a competitive world. You will be a late arrival if you do that. You have got to bite the bullet, and you've got to start using it in your job, and then you've got to start preaching the gospel of AI in your organization. I am totally convinced that that is the right way to go. Many big corporations have found that as the only way to overcome the resistance in big organizations is for the leaders themselves to use it and to talk about it a great deal. I also think at a really senior level, there are ethical considerations about AI that need to be taken into account. And I think where you've got public companies, for example, boards do need to develop some basic guidelines and principles about what ethical behavior with AI looks like. And I think within that framework of those sort of broad guidelines, then all the leaders should engage. There aren't many coaching meetings these days where I don't go online and say, when I'm coaching a client, what their problems were at the last meeting, and ask ChatGPT how to solve them, so that I can have an intelligently focused discussion with the person that I'm coaching. I don't have any, proprietary knowledge of how to do things. And if ChatGPT or some other, last week I had to analyze 15 years of Excel spreadsheets, and ChatGPT wrote me a Python program to do it in about 4 seconds, which I then ran. And so I'm a great user, and I believe it, and I believe all leaders should take it on board and accept it.
And I think for me, a lot of it, so I spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos or trying to keep up to date with the latest developments. I love everything about this, so I try and test what ChatGPT can do versus what Perplexity might do, or the Gemini software by Google does, and just to see how things work then. But that ranges from work-based tasks to then taking pictures of my plant when it's got a dead leaf, saying, right, this plant isn't very well, what am I doing wrong, how do I fix it? Versus taking pictures of the old Star Wars toys I brought home from my parents' house recently to say, should I bin it, should I give it a charity, or should I sell it? And it tells me that because that Star Wars figure has a vinyl coat rather than a fabric one, actually that's worth quite a bit of money now, Paul, so you need to sell that online somewhere. So I am trying to experiment as much as possible to see what can I do. And it goes back to Lucy's point about building it. My default setting is, how do I use AI at the moment? What can it do, but also what can't it do? But I want to use it as a tool now that enables me to become my best self, but also maximize my time to find ways to do things in my life that I want to do. How do I carve time out for the nice things I want to do in life? Because I wasn't born to work. I was born to flounce around and do lovely things and pontificate about stuff. So how do I craft that time to do stuff? One of the points mentioned earlier that I want to come back to, and one of the modules I teach on is about recruitment and about talent management. We talked earlier about how we select that type of talent. I think as a leader, then trying to find the right people for your organizations is really important then. So what have we all learned in terms of how do we make that selection process and recognition process good then? How have you surrounded yourselves by the right people to enable your success? I think that's a really important point then. I'll come to you first. Doug, have you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's thoughts that you learn. And, I learned in life there's 2 R's. There's recruitment or retention. As a young business owner, you're trying to go as fast as you can, and you suddenly realize that running a business is like managing a conveyor belt. And sometimes that if you don't get everything aligned, you get in trouble. Very early on, we worked in an industry where staff turnover was really high, and you go faster trying to keep recruit, and then all of a sudden you realize it's this huge on cost. And like, if the industry turns over 60% of people and you have 1,000 people, that's 600 people you've got to onboard a year. So very early on, we managed to slow the conveyor belt down and invest the money in our staff. So you don't make more money, but you simply retain the staff. So it's either retention or recruitment. Those two R's, if they're out of alignment, are very, very difficult. And the recruitment one runs away at speed. So very early on, we put a huge pot of money aside for personal development and invested it in our staff. And, the byproduct of it was, for years and years and years, we had industry leading staff turnover, which was so low. We were the poster child of the industry. And if you have the right people, everything falls into line. That you got better productivity, you've got better pride where you work, scores. I suppose the ultimate endorsement for me was that we ended up hiring most of the people from family and friends, and the sort of whole network, and it's almost self-perpetuating. So being able to align and realize the value of having a very, very well motivated, trained and engaged workforce. Occasionally, it's sad because you've got someone who's brilliant who you have to accept. If you train and motivate people and invest money in them, sometimes they leave. Sometimes you do the work for other people. And that's one where you have to take a big, deep breath and go, ouch, and then smile and say, wish you good luck. But you realize, you won't keep everybody. But the way I looked at it in the end was, if people come looking for your people, that is almost like the ultimate endorsement. So for me, getting the two R's aligned is absolutely crucial.
And you might find that just by supporting that person, letting them flourish and thrive, perhaps they have to go to another place, but the reaction you get to other staff members then, that's really powerful because they're seeing how supportive you can be and how it's meant to be the supportive process, not just trying to retain people for different reasons then. So I also think there might be a book there for you about the rule of two, because you mentioned 2 H's and 2 R's. So I think that can be a post-work project of writing that book then. So if you want more ideas, you're welcome to come to me. And Lucy, what do you think then? What's been your secret to retaining or even finding the talent in the first place?
Oh, I'm not sure I have one really, because like anybody who scaled a business, I've made an awful lot of mistakes along the way. I think that the people who I'd say work the best and the ones who do best in the organization are, again, those that are aligned with the mission, who know what they're signing up for, and who know what they're getting as a job, and they're really clear about what they want from it as well. So it's a what's in it for you, what's in it for me kind of conundrum. There has to be an acceptance at certain levels in an organization, especially given that we have a generation of people coming through who've been told by the world that surrounds them that this kind of job for life, one place for 24 years doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah.
They're not incentivized in careers in the same way that even I was when I started. I'm a millennial. I was lucky enough, I was probably one of the last of my generation to be able to buy a house fairly easily before the age of 30. I say fairly easily, but before the age of 30. If you look at kind of the traditional I suppose, badges of wealth or success that prior generations and prior workplaces were set up with, salary, promotion, good pension, private health, buying a house, having a couple of kids, and maybe you only need one salary to support everybody. It doesn't exist anymore. That world's gone, disappeared, kaput. So building structures that play to that, you're not going to get the right people because they know it's completely unattainable for them. So what do they want? They value autonomy, freedom, being able to be a digital nomad, having purpose in what they do, but also valuing the ability to hop between careers. So if you've got a really long tail on your ROI for getting somebody ramped up and scaled into your organization to make them effective, if it's going to take you 6 years before they're fully making their money for you, and then they leave after 6 months, that's a you problem. Like, you've got to fix that. You have to be an organization that knows, okay, well, maybe people only want to be here for 2 or 3 years. Okay, how do I work with that? How do I fix that? What do I do? How do I get that to work for me? And then yes, culture feels different, and yes, the organization is the culture's shifting and changing as it grows and people turn over. But um, everyone's getting what they want. I always say relationships always work when both sides get what they want from it. And if you're getting people who are doing for you in the business what you want them to do for whatever time period that is, and they are getting from you salary, money, autonomy, and development opportunities for whatever time period that is, we're all the winner. But yeah, it's the change in the world means that companies now have to think about, I can't spend 6 months up ramping somebody to be performing to top capacity. How do I get them there more quickly? Or if they are going to take a very long time, those people probably need to be really bought in with some heavy incentives tied to overall company performance that are meaningful to them, and it's more likely to be at your exec level, like share options and stuff like that. At a junior level, they don't normally care about that stuff because it's not paying off their credit card bill right now, so it's meaningless to them. And unless they've actually been through a company that's had a liquidity event, that thing's not going to matter. So it's about structuring that for something that matters and gets what you need from people in the short term. And then if they're longer term people, fantastic.
There's an element I probably get kicked out of a psychologist club for saying this, where we like to making things very objective in terms of decision making. But for me, part of it's about who do you want to work with, who do you want to build a relationship with. So someone might have all the qualifications or experiences, but who do I want to spend time with? Who could I trust and build rapport with? Who do I want to surround myself with? And we have to get this balance right of being allowed to make some subjective decisions in terms of how we want to lead stuff versus saying on paper this person is the best. Does it feel like that sometimes? And sometimes we're trying to be pushed away from allowing our feelings to come into it and being this objective person. I think there's a lot of value in recognizing the people we want to work with, who we can build trust and rapport with then. And Stephen, from your perspective, what's recruitment been like? Has it been easy to find the talent to surround you to enable you to achieve the success you wanted?
Well, first of all, picking up on Douglas's 2Rs, I think in recruitment in the US, it's the people that leave within a year usually say it was never what I expected. That's a leadership problem. That's on the leader for not understanding how their expectations work. It's particularly difficult at a senior level because so much money and so much expectation is laid upon people who are recruiting at a senior level. And I would perhaps just encourage everybody to understand that the people that come to you are on a career journey. That career journey is not always with you. They may go and they may come back later into your organization. And when it comes to recruitment, I would say a CEO of a healthcare company said to me last week, I spend 40% of my time trying to get the right people into this organization. Now, that is perhaps a little bit high, but it is an important message. I think maybe AI and time are going to show us that what we are really recruiting for are deeper qualities in people that can join us on the journey for a period of time, that have certain skills, but underneath it are deeper qualities. And what we're seeking are the qualities of perseverance, loyalty, the ability to solve a problem on your own and land, when a problem hits you, land upright rather than upside down in a situation. And looking into recruiting by looking into people's history about how they have coped with those things in the past and trying to get those deeper qualities on board and build, as Douglas was saying, build loyalty and retention programs that really respect them. And people often say, but the salaries are astronomical. But in fact, the payoff when you actually get the right people into organizations is also astronomical for the long term.
I'm going to stop you there. We just reached into 2 o'clock. So I want to thank the three of you for a really interesting, informative, and hopefully worthwhile chat for the people viewing this. It is recorded, so I will record it for this. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really enjoyed talking to all three of you. So thank you very much. And I hope you found my hosting so suitable to enable you to talk and to comment and reflect on these things. I'm looking forward to seeing more of these events in the future. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.